What's up, Grow and Go Fit fam? Welcome back to a new video. What's up? Yeah, we're gonna hop right into it today because we ain't got no time to waste. So on this week's menu, we're gonna be having some oatmeal protein packed muffins, and then for lunch, we're gonna be doing a sweet potato casserole with ground beef. So you'll see what that kind of looks like down the line. So for your breakfast, you're gonna need the following ingredients. You're going to need some rolled oats, oatmeal, some protein powder, whatever protein powder of choice. You're going to need some unsweetened applesauce, 2 large eggs, Truvia or stevia substituted sugar, or you can also use honey or maple syrup. We have some vanilla extract, baking powder, baking soda, salt, and then I have some blueberries that I'm going to toss in some of my muffins. I also have my cupcake liners that I'm going to be using so that way I can pour my muffins into. But that's all you're gonna need for the breakfast. Let's go ahead and jump right into the recipe.
So I had to go back in and kind of change out my recipe a little bit. So you will be needing some all-purpose flour as well for this recipe. And you're going to want to start off by making sure to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. So that way, whenever our muffins are done, we can throw them into the oven. Okay, so we're going to want to grab a big bowl, and then we're going to start off with our dry ingredients. Right here we have 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and then I went ahead and blended up my rolled oats, and I did 1 cup of rolled oats as well. So that's what we have here. We're going to dump that into the bowl, and then you're going to go in with a 1/2 cup of protein powder or 48 grams of whatever protein powder of choice. And then we're going to go in with some baking powder. So you're going to need 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then we're going to do 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And then after the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, we're going to go in with 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You're going to take a whisk and just mix that all up. Then we're going to grab a second bowl for our wet ingredients, and we are going to start off with our unsweetened applesauce. So you're going to use 1 cup of unsweetened applesauce. And then we're going to go in and we're going to do 1/2 cup of plain non-fat Greek yogurt. And then we're going to go in and you can either choose to do 1/4 cup of honey or maple syrup. I'm choosing to do 1/4 cup of maple syrup for mine. But it's your choice, whatever you think will be sweeter for you. Then you're going to add in 2 large eggs and then 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. You're going to mix it up, but don't over mix it because that might mess with the texture of your muffins. So go ahead and mix those ingredients together. Okay, now that we have both of our dry and wet ingredients ready, we're going to slowly incorporate our wet ingredients into our dry ingredients. So you can see that I'm adding a little bit at a time and then mixing it just so that way I'm not over mixing it, and I'm not mixing everything fast either. This is going to make sure that your muffins don't sink in the middle whenever you bake them as well. So super important here to get the technique right so that way your muffins don't flop whenever you make them. So the slower the better. Okay, now that we have all of our wet ingredients incorporated into our dry ingredients, we kind of have our batter here. Then you're going to take a 1/2 cup of frozen blueberries. You can do a 1/2 cup or cup. I'm only going to be using about a 1/2 cup for mine. And a little trick here is to add like about a tablespoon or less, maybe like a 1/2 tablespoon of flour to your frozen blueberries. And coat them so that way whenever you add them into your batter, it does not turn your entire batter purple. So then you're going to go in and dump those blueberries, and you're going to slowly fold them in. I'm not using a whisk here. I decided to use kind of like a spatula. So I folded those blueberries in, and that's what we got at the end. I went ahead and set up my muffin tin with some cupcake liners. And I'm going to go in and just add my batter. You're going to want to make sure that your liners are about 2/3 full. If you overfill them, then, you run into the risk of your cupcakes kind of falling in the middle or not rising properly. So Make sure to not overfill your liners here. I was able to use all my batter and fill up about 12 of these. So you might have a little bit of batter left over, which is completely fine. But you're going to make about 12 of these muffins. And yeah, once your muffin liners are filled up, we're going to go ahead and throw these into the oven to bake for 20 to 25 minutes or until your toothpick comes out clean in the middle. So let's go ahead and throw these in.
All right, our muffins just came out of the oven. This is what they're looking like. We're gonna go ahead and just let them cool for a bit and then they'll be ready to eat and enjoy. All right, so for lunch, we're doing the sweet potato casserole with some ground beef. So you're gonna need some sweet potato, 4 medium sweet potatoes. I have about 3 medium-sized one and 1 really large one. So I'm gonna cut it all up and see if I need to use all of them. But based off your judgment, this is a really large sweet potato, so you might not need 4. You might only need 3. So you can make that judgment call based on the size that your local grocery store has. And then I'm going to be using some ground beef. I have the leanest 93 to 7% fat ground beef. I'm going to be using 2 pounds of that. I'm going to be using a can of corn, a can of black beans, a can of fire roasted tomatoes, some baby spinach, a whole red onion, some garlic, and then only going to be using the yellow bell pepper here. And then I'm going to be finishing it off with some pepper jack cheese. Of course, we're going to be using some seasonings in our recipe, which you guys will see. I will be including all the seasonings and ingredients in the description down below. If you're not sure what you need, you guys can always check out the description, and we'll always have the ingredients for the recipes and the macros. So make sure to check that out. But enough yapping, let's go ahead and get prepping. So before you start chopping up all your vegetables, you're actually going to want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. So that way we can throw in our sweet potato to cook for 30 minutes. Okay, so I went ahead and peeled and chopped up my sweet potato. I chopped up my 1 bell pepper that I had and my 1 red onion. I then chopped up 3 cloves of garlic and I did 4 ounces of pepper jack cheese. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my pan for that. And I like to just throw some aluminum foil down to make it easier for cleanup. You don't have to do that. And then you're going to throw your sweet potato in there and you're going to toss it in some olive oil. So you can measure this out. I would say start off with a tablespoon. I'm just going to slightly drizzle this over. And then about a half a teaspoon of salt and 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. And I'm just going to mix this around so it's nice and coated with that olive oil. And if you ever feel like you need some more oil, you can go ahead and add that in. And I'm going to throw these in for 30 minutes at 400 degrees. While our sweet potato is cooking inside our oven, we're going to go ahead and start on our ground beef. So we have our pan to medium high heat and we have some spray oil. I'm just going to take my ground beef and dump it directly into my pan. And I'm going to start off by adding about half of our red onion. And I'm going to add in half a teaspoon of salt to start off with. And then I'm also going to do a half a teaspoon of pepper. Once your ground beef is pretty much all the way brown through, you're going to go in and add your garlic, your yellow bell pepper, the remainder of your onion. You're going to mix this through. And at this point, your ground beef should be safe to taste. So if you want to go ahead and taste it to see if it needs any more salt, pepper, or any other seasoning that you would like to add, like garlic powder, onion powder, cumin, whatever really that you want to add to your ground beef mixture. I'm just going to let that cook for about 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go in and add a can of fire roasted tomatoes. I'm going to mix this in. And if you want to get rid of some of this liquid, you can. Okay, I'm going to add in a can of black beans that have been rinsed and drained. And then I'm going to go in and add a can of whole kernel corn. So I'm just going to go ahead and mix this all together. Now I'm just going to go in and add some salt and pepper to my veggies. Also going to add a packet of chicken bouillon. And our sweet potato has been roasting for 30 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and just take that out. I'm going to combine everything here, give it a taste. And then once it's good to go, I'm going to go ahead and just dump my ground beef mixture on top of my casserole dish. Okay, I topped off my meat mixture on top of my sweet potato. So then I'm gonna go ahead and just cover this with aluminum foil and throw it back in the oven. All right, so our 15 minutes is up. I went ahead and removed my foil from our casserole. I have my pepper jack cheese. I'm gonna go ahead and just sprinkle all this all over the top. All right, and we're just gonna throw this back in for 10 more minutes uncovered.
All right, our 10 minutes is up and our casserole dish is all done. You're going to want to make sure that your sweet potatoes are fork tender. You're then going to go ahead and split this casserole up into 8 servings and enjoy.
All right, y'all, and that brings this video to a close. I hope that you guys give these recipes a try. If you guys do happen to give the recipes a try, please leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys thought, or if you tweak the recipe a little bit so that way I can try whatever you guys did and see if I like it. If you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate the support. And if you are enjoying the content, please make sure to give this a thumbs up and subscribe. And make sure to share this with your friends and family so that they can join in on the Grow and Glow Fit family. But yeah, that's pretty much a wrap for this video. I hope that you guys remember to continue to grow stronger, glow brighter, and stay fit. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.